Stand by for broadcast.
You're listening to Inside Air, a behind-the-wire view of the Royal Air Force, its people, technology and operations.
Hello, I'm Squadron Leader Peter Lisney, and in this episode we hear from the Air Officer Commanding 2 Group.
I can still remember though, after the interview, I got a phone call from Air Chief Marshal Sir Rich Knighton, and he said, "You've got the job." And I can still remember saying, "Sir, I will love you forever." Everything ultimately is aiming towards that tip of the spear about how you'll deliver the operational effect, likely from an aircraft, probably from the Combat Air Force, and everything that we do is to enable that to happen. And our commanders are working really, really hard on everybody's behalf, and that you get these either armchair warriors with a keyboard or people who can just comment on social media, or sadly even some people in higher public office choosing to make a comment about that. And that's just not fair, and it's just not right.
Also, in this episode, we'll reheat a few stories just in case you missed them, and we'll be finding out who is under the hat this week.
And what bit of luxury kit do you never deploy without?
There are two, if I'm allowed to. One is good quality Earl Grey tea, and secondly is my toothbrush. I can put up with all hardships, but I must be able to brush my teeth.
Find out who is under the hat at the end of this episode. Now, it's been 2 years since Air Vice-Marshal Jason Appleton was appointed as AOC 2 Group. So, before he moves on, we thought it would be good to find out what 2 Group does and how it enables the RAF to fly, fight and win across the globe. Air Officer Commanding 2 Group, Air Vice-Marshal Jace Appleton, thank you for joining us on Inside Air.
Pleasure.
So, I'm just going to start off with this, probably the most important question that we're going to ask today. How did a lad from Bolton end up as AOC 2 Group?
There are many people asked that question over the years, kind of accidentally, really. So if I, in a nutshell, and I'll try and dial it down, there's quite a lot in there. I was a 16-year-old at school, knew nothing about the Air Force, had not been an air cadet, hadn't been fortunate enough to be part of the air cadet organisation. And a schools liaison officer came to the school and gave a presentation. There were 2 fellow pupils who were air cadets, and they mentioned it, so I went along to listen. And one of the things he said is they have this thing called a 6th form scholarship, where if you're lucky enough, you might get sponsored to do 30 hours flying in a light aircraft. You get a little bit of money while you're in the 6th form, and you can do an outward bound course at this place in Scotland called Grantown-on-Spey. And I thought, that sounds interesting, particularly the money. I could put that towards a car. So I went with my colleagues down to Biggin Hill, which is where we used to do the officer and aircrew selection at the time. And after a couple of days, these 2 who were experts in the Air Force had dropped out during the selection process. And at the end of the week, somehow I was still there and got offered a 6th form scholarship. The thing that really helped me to bite the bug, or bit the bug of flying was in my flying scholarship. I was 17 years of age. I was flying out of Liverpool Airport. And at 17, I was solo in an aircraft in between the lower 6 and the upper 6. And I'd only passed my driving test 3 months before, and somebody had trusted me with this. And that was it. I was bitten with the bug. So I turned down my places at university, and I joined the Royal Air Force 6 months after completing my A-level studies. So that's what the Air Force had me at the age of 17. And then 35 years and 2 months later, here I am since starting officer training, myself and an officer cadet called Harv Smith. We're on the same intake, going through officer training. And a lot of luck, opportunity, timing, and a little bit of hard work has led to this stage where I am AOC 2 Group.
Amazing. So you had that moment in the sky near Liverpool going, wow, that was probably how did I get here moment. How many other moments like that have you had in your career?
So there've been a few. The way I always frame it is the Air Force has been very good to me and for me. I genuinely come from a very working class background. I was fortunate to go to a pretty good school. It was a fee-paying school. You'd had to pass an exam to get through. I was there on an assisted place to go through. And honestly, university beckoned, but I didn't want to be a burden on my parents anymore. This opportunity came up with the Air Force, and over the years, it's been very good to me and for me. If there was one regret I might have had is I didn't go to university and didn't get a degree. I lived a bit of that life because I still had friends from the sixth form who went to university, so I did a bit of the social life with them. But ironically, quite a few years later on, I found myself at Staff College and I gained a master's degree as part of the studies, which cost me nothing, and that's just part of the service offer. So here I am.
Fewer parties at Shrivenham, though.
Fewer parties and a whole lot of studying and hard work. But the odd party, work hard, play reasonably hard. But yeah, so I can't say again, it's part of the offer. So that was another moment where it was quite a proud moment for me to go, actually, I was clever enough to have been able to gain a degree and gained a master's degree, funded through my service in the Royal Air Force. And there've been a few other of those moments, when you get to your first tour and the first time on the front line. The first time I went on operations, I was 23 years of age.
What were you doing? What was your job?
So I was a helicopter navigator. So I went to the support helicopter force. So predominantly, what do we used to call ourselves? In effect, a taxi service for the Army and the Royal Marines. Wherever they needed to go on the battlefield, that was our job. So I was the first tourist down at RAF Odium on Pumas, on the Mighty 33 Squadron. And during that time is when the former Yugoslavia had started to collapse into civil war. And we deployed as part of the Rapid Reaction Force to the former Yugoslavia. This is in 1995. And as a 23-year-old flying officer, was the first time I went to war. The first time I saw some of the dare I say it, some of the horrors of war, some of the the bad side to it. I led the first formation of helicopters into Sarajevo Airport in 1995. And all I ever remember of Sarajevo, and this is for the older listeners out there, was Torval and Dean won the Winter Olympics skating in Sarajevo in something like 1980-something.
4, I think.
Was it? I'll take your word for it. But it looked very different. It was there was a long runway there, but there were an awful lot of sandbags around.
And you were slow and low.
We were, well, it depends what your definition of low is. We were doing about 150 miles an hour, probably, so about 135, 140 knots, and we were at 50 feet. And we came off Mount Igman, which is just on the southern side, and we descended in from there and arrived at 50 feet. And in fact, I can still remember it was a French military air traffic controller, and they cleared us to land on the runway. And there was no way we were going to do a predictable to the runway. We didn't need to. We're on helicopters. So actually, the two Pumas, we did a quick stop, which is where you stop it as quickly as possible. It does what it says on the tin, whilst turning around the back of the air traffic control tower and landed in on the apron, on the parking space there. And then the French military air traffic controller proceeded to tell us off and said, I told you to approach the runway and land on the runway in future, you must do that. And there was another foreign military aircraft there as well who jumped on the radio and said, yes, but it looked good. So that was quite important. That was quite a nice moment.
And Air Clues, the magazine that tells us about the goods and the bads of flying. Have you ever had one of those I learned about flying from that moment?
Oh, gosh, there've been a few. And I've got to say that the journey we've been on as an Air Force were far, far safer than we ever used to be. The amount of flying we do is probably less if you look at the amount of aircraft and the amount of flying hours. And my first ever tour as a squadron leader was in flight safety for the Joint Helicopter Command, as it was. That was in 2002 to 2004. No, I could tell you how many aircraft accidents we had in that time because that was part of my job. And I was the single dedicated flight safety person for all of JHC, which had more aircraft than Strike Command had at that time as part of it. We do safety very differently now. You know, it was one person dedicated. Now we've got, you know, entire teams. We've got the RAF Safety Centre. We've got the duty holding construct. But yes, indeed, there have been some I learnt about flying from that.
Feels like you're not going to tell me.
Well, I think we train our people really, really well. And if I'm really honest, the most scared I've ever been in the air has been down to the weather. Okay. It's not been down to enemy action. And I have been, you know, as a helicopter and service in former Yugoslavia, Northern Ireland, Iraq and Afghanistan. I have been in an aircraft that's been shot at on several occasions. But we train our people in how to deal with that. We have tactics, techniques and procedures in how to respond to that. But sometimes in a helicopter, when you're in some pretty poor weather and you don't have many options, it's not like you can punch up above the weather, and you also don't have an ejection seat. So actually, I guess the only time I've really been scared in an aircraft is because of the weather. And one of those occasions was in the former Yugoslavia when we were in deepest Bosnia at the time. We'd been delayed because the general that we were flying had been delayed in a meeting. He'd been involved, and we were trying to get back. Thunderstorms, surrounded by mountains, and we couldn't get through. And we were based in Croatia at a place called Ploče on the coast. And we couldn't get through all of this weather. And we ended up running out of fuel. So we ended up landing on at night in a thunderstorm, and we knew we were about a mile from a Bosnian training camp with 2 aircraft again. And as a young flying officer, again, 23 years of age, then all of your drills where you've got your weapon and your arm up, and we were required to guard those aircraft. Unfortunately, the British Army sent a couple of convoys with us to help guard the aircraft. And then the next day as the weather, so we slept in the back of the aircraft, and the next day as the weather cleared, we had to get a fuel Bowser out to us, refill the aircraft, and we managed to get back to base. Is that an I learnt about flying? Well, it was quite a hairy, scary moment. What would I have done differently? Not an awful lot, except prepare better. We always travel with a go bag, but you just think, hey, you know, you're never going to actually need everything that's in there. I learnt there that I always carry things with me to make sure I'm self-sufficient should you be required to do a downbird, either sleep in the aircraft or go on the run in an escape and evasion type scenario.
How do you think these experiences as a young flying officer, flying operationally, how do you think these experiences have prepared you for being a senior officer today?
Wow. I think early in our careers, there's something interesting. It depends on all the different professions, but as a junior, be it a junior officer, be it a junior aviator, what do we want people to do? We want them to become really good at their job. So we put people through training, phase 1, phase 2 training, and then a bit of phase 3, and you're there at the front line. But you're not necessarily going to be the best at what you do. But before we start to give you extra responsibility, that's what we need you to do. Become the best that you can at whatever your particular role or profession is. So apart from having operational experience, actually, it's more of my later experiences which have helped prepare me for this role. That gave me operational credibility. It gave me an understanding of air and aviation and operations. It certainly made me more resilient, and that's probably the sort of thing that I would point towards to go, you know, when you're going through tough times, and it just makes you a bit more resilient and able to deal with them. But in order, you know, what's prepared me to become an AOC, there are a lot of my experience that came later on, and we have, you know, certain hoops that you jump through. I was really fortunate to become a squadron commander. I was really fortunate to be selected as a station commander, and ultimately as an AOC. What a tremendous privilege, and how fortunate am I. But those are perhaps the roles which have pointed a little bit more to prepare me for becoming an AOC, because those have given me more of an understanding of what I'm responsible, what I'm accountable for, and making sure that you can help all of our people are prepared best for what we need them to do.
And I imagine that as you looked up the tree, you made some decisions about how you might act as you were went through the ranks, both positive and negative?
Yeah, so it's interesting, isn't it, the leadership journey that we go on. So as a just 19-year-old graduating from officer training, was I really prepared, to be a leader? I reflect back then and I think, what sort of leader was I going to be? And I think then, as a just 19-year-old, what credibility did I have? I'd been through a training course. I needed to gain realistic experience. But my view then was, I'll just be really popular, won't I? I'll get people to like me and then they'll do what I need them to do. Well, in reality, isn't it nice to be popular, but it's better to be respected as a leader. And yes, there's obviously been instances as you've gone along there in terms of how you grow as a leader, how you interact with people, how you get the very best out of your people, including when times are tough.
Let's talk about the group structure that we have in the Royal Air Force. So this is something that goes back a long time. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us the groups that we have today and generally what their purpose is? Because at the head of each of those groups is someone similar to yourself.
Sure. So we have 4 groups in the Royal Air Force now. 3 the warfighting groups and 2 and 1 is the training group. So we have 1 group which has all of the fighting assets, all the operational aircraft and platforms. You have 2 group, and the way I frame that, it's the non-flying fighting forces that make up global enablement, so the 6 forces there. And I also have responsibility for the 24 air bases within the air top level budget. You have 11 group, which is responsible for the command and control. So when we commit our aircraft and our people and our forces operationally, they're the ones who are doing the liaison and doing the command and control of what it is that we do. And then you have 22 group, which is responsible for the training, preparing all of our people before they come and join one of the 3 warfighting groups. So mine is 2 group. In effect, I call it the enabling group. We help enable the Royal Air Force to fly, fight and win.
Gotcha.
When we talk about what it is that the Royal Air Force does on behalf of the nation, it delivers air and space power. Because what I didn't talk about is Space Command that sits underneath air as well. Hence we have an air and space commander. But it's not a group. It is not formally called a group. But yes, you could argue we're very platform specific, but there's a lot of stuff that goes on as well that whilst that might be the visible punch, if you will, our combat air forces are the ones who go deep and deliver the effect. Well, you've also got the ISTAR forces, which help us understand and deliver the effect. Then you've got the air mobility force, without which we wouldn't be able to get to wherever we need to do. But when you start to break down what it is the global enablement forces do for you, one example I'll give you is 90SU or 90 Signals Unit. What's in a name? There's a historical name. Personally, I refer to it as the Royal Air Force's Comms and Cyber Force. But they're also delivering operational effect on a daily basis, and that might be part of a coordinated response in addition to what Space Command is able to do to help to shape and support and enable some of those operations. But yes, everything ultimately is aiming towards that tip of the spear about how you'll deliver the operational effect, likely from an aircraft, probably from the combat air force, and everything that we do is to enable that to happen.
So let's talk more about 2 group then,
yeah.
and its purpose. I've got to ask you first of all, how did you feel when you were appointed as AOC 2 group? Did you have your eyes on 11 group or 1 group?
No, so I had so we interview for these roles. It's not a case of, it's not quite a nepotism thing where it is who's the chosen one, who's best mates with the chief. We have to apply for these jobs. You have to be selectable, and then they'll narrow it down to interview, and you have to win an interview. So I had previously interviewed for 22 group, and I wasn't successful at that interview. And a few months later, I was invited to interview for 2 group. And my view, and I'm wired this way, everything happens for a reason. I think 22 group's amazing. I used to be a flying instructor years ago. I commanded what was then a 22 group station, RAF Shawbury. It's a training focused station. So I thought that was, where I was going to go. I'd compete well for it. But everything happens for a reason, because I got the group that's right for me. It's very large in terms of the number of people. I'm very much people focused and sort of lived experience. And I'm delighted. At the end of this week, it'll be 2 years I've been in the role. I can still remember, though, after the interview, I got a phone call from Air Chief Marshal Sir Rich Knighton. And he said, "You've got the job." And I can still remember saying, "Sir, I will love you forever." So there's the story. I'll remind him about that whenever I see him. But I did tell the Chief of the Air Staff that I loved him for selecting me for this job. And what a privilege. It genuinely isn't about me, but what an amazing job. And the opportunity to engage with all of our amazing people that are just delivering great effect on a daily basis. I count myself extremely fortunate.
Yeah, huge responsibility. In that interview, you bring up the interview. You must have had to been asked a question about your vision. What will you do for Two Group?
Yeah.
And how did that go? What did you say?
So I from what I can remember, 2 years ago, I do remember preparing well for it. At the time, the Royal Air Force was going through a fair bit of transformation and change, and one of those aspects was the change to the Wittering model. So in the old model, the one that I grew up with in the Royal Air Force, the Bimbrook model, and I think RAF Bimbrook closed before even I joined, but it was still referred to as this Bimbrook model. But that was where you had a single station commander and everything sat underneath them. And yet we've moved on, haven't we? We've moved on where operational demands versus demands of the airbase. And the whole point of what we call the Wittering model is you have a commander who's responsible for enabling the activity on their airbase. And then you have an operational or an output commander who's responsible for the operational output. And therefore, they can go forward, they can go wherever they need to do, and they're not distracted by whatever it is in terms of running the base. So I'm a huge fan of the new model, but change and transformation is quite tough, and taking people on that change journey it is difficult, and you have to convince, and you have to you communicate and communicate with people. So one of my aims at that interview was to say, I want to finish all of this transformation. We were about 2/3 of the way through. So Two Group didn't have 24 air bases at that time. It was about 16. The Air Mobility Force had just transferred across to one group. So part of my pitch was, I just want to finish this transformation and then give everyone a bit of stability. I think people, change fatigue or change skepticism is what I talk about, really. Do people really see the value in the change? So I wanted to get that done, give a bit of stability. And the other bit I wanted to do was try and improve the lived experience for all of our people. And I can still remember saying it in the pitch. I am not so vain that I want people to remember me by my name, but I'd quite like them to think of me to go, oh yeah, we remember him. He was very engaging, and he was working hard on our behalf as well. And that was part of the pitch, which was well over 2 years ago now.
And were you audited against that pitch?
So interestingly, the previous Chief of the Air Staff, and indeed the current Chief of the Air Staff has carried on, but he sort of would have a quarterly one-to-one with me. And that's exactly what Chief Marshal Sir Rich Knighton asked me the first couple of times. Right, you gave us the pitch, how's it going? So some of it, the change and transformation was all delivered pretty quickly, but at the right pace, so we took our people with them. The challenge really has been about the lived experience, and I put a lot of the onus on that on our commanders. So when I talked about the fact that I had to interview to become an AOC, every single one of our station commanders has to interview and has to win an interview, which again is a relatively recent thing. But what it means is we're absolutely getting the right people into those roles. It's not just about how well their appraisals have been written and what their profile looks like. It's about they come and sell us their vision. And part of it, and what we want to hear in every interview, is people focus, lived experience. So that has been a bit of a theme throughout my time with all of the station commanders, working hard to improve the lived experience for all of their people. Notwithstanding, you've only got so many levers there to play with. So all the levers within their gift, and if they need my help, to reach out.
Okay. Now, 2 years in,
Yep.
you're coming to the end of your tenure.
I am, sadly.
We're going to ask you about successes, but before we allow you to talk about all the great stuff that you've done, let's talk about the challenges.
Wow. So I think you can probably break the challenges down. If you ask most people what the challenges are that we face now, it's probably workforce challenges, it's infrastructure challenges, and it's making sure we've got enough, finance money. I don't want my people to worry about money, but it's my job to fight hard to make sure we get the investment to improve the way we do business, be that operational capability, equipment, or be it investing in our air bases. So those have perhaps been the biggest challenges. I've been really genuinely very proud to be part of a senior leadership team, and I think most of our people out at the units probably I used to have this image of the RAF senior leadership team. Well, you're just them senior officers who perhaps reside up at High Wycombe. There's been a real focus on addressing the strategic challenges facing the Royal Air Force, and perhaps the biggest one was our people challenge. So, led from the top, from the chief and the 3 stars giving direction, direct to people and his staff, but all of us working collegiately to say, right, how can we improve retention? How can we support the recruitment challenge? And how can we increase training capacity such that we can get back to workforce balance? And that is it's a regular focus for us. And we're seeing some of those successes now. We're seeing the much increased numbers of people starting at Halton at the Aviator Training Academy every 2 weeks. We're starting to see those people now bleed to the front line, albeit it takes a while to get through phase 2 training. Part of my input to that is making sure our stations are ready to receive these increased numbers. So we've got all of the support wrap around those people arriving at the stations. What it also means is I've had to give up some people from the operational forces to go into 22 groups so that we're 100% staffed within the training capacity so we can increase the numbers. So it's taking a bit of short-term pain at the front line, but investing in the recruitment and the training pipeline such that we can grow. So that's been probably a really big challenge, and we'll start to see those dividends after my time and after the time of some of my other colleagues within the senior leadership team. But this is all driving to get the Royal Air Force back into workforce balance by 2030, if not sooner in some cases. So that's been a big challenge. Infrastructure remains another challenge, and if I have one frustration, it's been quite challenging to get the improvements in the infrastructure at the pace that we would all like. But we can celebrate some successes in that area. The way I used to say it, when I travel to all of my 24 stations every year, at least once a year, if not more often. So I spend a lot of time on the road so I can see and understand the challenges faced. When I went up to RAF Lossiemouth, it had been the first time, a couple of years ago, first time I'd been there since 1996, and I didn't recognise the station. The majority, not everything, majority was really quite modern. There'd been a lot of investment. They'd had new aircraft types, the infrastructure, the messes, the single living accommodation, the service families accommodation. It was really well set up. 2 weeks later, I was at RAF Odium, and I'd first been posted to RAF Odium 31 years ago. And it looked pretty much the same as it did from 31 years ago. So what we have is, a difference, and all of our air bases somewhere in between. What I want to do is drag every single one of our air bases up to the standard so that the offer is common to our people. Doesn't matter where you're posted to, but you're going to get good accommodation, you're going to get a nice place to work, and all of the services and the support on offer is common. And they're as common as they can be, but we still need to see more investment, particularly in the infrastructure side of things. And that's been a challenge. It's been a real challenge. The There was an aspiration to try and remove all grade 4 accommodation by 2030. So that's our worst, our smallest and perhaps the lowest standard. And then remove all grade 3 by 2033. The reality is that that's been smoothed out, which is a term for delayed. And part of that is down to affordability. But we need to be really honest with our people. And some of that comes down to it's purely the inflationary cost of infrastructure builds have grown exponentially over the last few years, certainly post-COVID. And it's about trying to get that affordability. But I think it's really important that we maintain the pressure and get the investment in our infrastructure on our air bases, as well as investing in our operational capabilities. And it's getting that balance right. Make sure we maintain the operational advantage in terms of delivery of air and space power, but we need to invest to make sure that the offer to our people is common. It's to a standard that a modern generation deserves.
So when you visit stations, and I presume you'll run town halls and you say, please be honest, tell me exactly what you think. What have been the common themes, and have you noticed those themes change over the 2 years?
Yeah, great question. They absolutely have. And I think it depends on what is on people's minds at that particular time. So it's not only I want them to be honest, I think we owe our people honesty as well. So I usually give an introductory talk of 5 or 10 minutes. I talk about what the senior leadership team is doing right now, what we are concentrating on. We more recently took the opportunity of a new chief of the air staff. So we took his priorities, his 4x4s, and we would present those to our people so they can understand, those are our orders. That's the direction of travel that the chief of the air staff wants to take the Royal Air Force. But then we invite questions and we invite honesty, and we want people, what's on your mind? And we always say the same thing, because usually nobody wants to put their hand up and go first. So we'll always say the same thing, right? We promise you an honest answer, and if we can't give you one, we'll come back to you and we'll get it back to you. And once the first person has asked a question, put their head above the parapet, and then the questions start to flow. So from my time, early doors, so I took over, as I said, 2 years ago this week, I think financially people were really feeling the pinch. So we would regularly get questions about money, pay rise, delayed, all the rest of it, cost of living. And then, 2 years ago, 2024, got probably one of the biggest pay rises, certainly in the last few decades, followed by another one last year. But what was really interesting is the questions on pay and reward sort of dried up. They're always there in people's minds, but those dried up. And then we'd sort of shift on to some other areas. Infrastructure can come up quite often. And it's easy to say, this is, jam tomorrow. What we do now when I deliver and go to bases, and I'm either doing an annual formal visit or I'm just doing a visit anyway, and I'll always offer a town hall. I go to Air Infra and say, right, can you give me the plan for this station? And it's their sort of 5 to 10 year plan. And what I'm able to do is say, right, this is currently what sits in the plan. And this is the investment that's coming. But talk is cheap and people need to see change. So one example I'll give you early in my time, I was going to visit Marham and I was with AOC One Group at the time, and he said, right, get your body armour on because you're going to get a real chest poking about infrastructure. Last year people were. And we arrived there and the station commander told us there's no hot water, and this is April, no hot water or heating in any of the single living accommodation. So people to get a shower had to put a towel under their arm and walk out to a car park to get a shower. And not a single person raised it and not a single person complained. The reason for that is twofold. One, there was a mini heat wave in April of 2024, so the weather was a bit warmer. But more importantly, ground had been broken on new accommodation and the heating and hot water main was being replaced. People could see it, and the station commander had been so forthcoming with his communication, explaining why, explaining what was happening, and people could visibly see the change was happening. And I've been back to Marham since. I've seen the new accommodation. I've seen the refurbished warrant officers and sergeants mess. And again, so it stops being an issue. But there are some of our other stations where I've been to where we're expecting a new slam block or single living accommodation, but it's been delayed by another year. So it's quite difficult when people, they don't believe you, and I understand why, until they see ground being broken. So I think it's really important to go, and I was really key in my first year to say, we are going to deliver this, grade 4 improvements, grade 3 improvements. My second year when I went back, I had to be really honest and say, okay, I didn't lie to you. I gave the information that I had, but this is the latest information. Our people, I tend to find, are really appreciative. If we're just honest and they can see one of the senior leadership team and we're being authentic and we're being honest with them, then they'll appreciate that, even if it's not necessarily the news they want to hear at that stage.
And in the past year, has the topic of base security come up?
It has, and that's been a bit of a challenge, particularly, let's not avoid the elephant in the room. On June the 20th last year, with the Palestine Action Group attack on one of our air bases, damaged a couple of AOC-1's aircraft, and they were able to depart the air base without us knowing about it, and we became aware of it after the fact. I've become a bit of a security expert since then, funny old thing. And what I've learned is a few things. One is security is a multifaceted aspect. It's not just about putting up a fence. A fence is but one physical barrier. It's also it's a layered approach that includes technology. It might include dogs, military working dogs. I've learned more about the value of military working dogs since that incident. It's about people, but it's also about a culture, and it's about driving a culture amongst our people. And things have changed, right, since all them years of campaigning overseas. So what we're starting to see is more of an investment in the security in our bases. It's not just about upgraded fences. We've invested quite significantly in technological enhancements that will inform us of, if there's an intruder on a base and the like. But we pushed really hard as well in terms of the security culture, the people being, demanding, asking the right questions. And that's really starting to pay dividends. I can give other examples where even from people from the whole force, contractors or civil servants, have stopped and challenged people. And that's a really good thing. The military working dogs I talked about, because we have military working dogs, they were able to clear the rest of the aircraft going back to June the 20th, such that by 11 a.m. that morning, we knew that there was nothing untoward on those aircraft and they were able to get back to flying. So minimal operational impact. And then we had the separate dogs in terms of the sniffer dogs who could follow the trail of where they went. We knew where the trail went cold. We handed that information over to the UK Counter-Terrorism Police, and the people who did that attack were arrested within a couple of days and are still currently at His Majesty's pleasure, awaiting trial for that. But yes, it has driven much more of a focus on security for our air bases. And for me, we've done some investment. We know there's still more work to do, but it's about driving that security culture with all of our people as well.
Okay. And on with that, I know that it's you've been frustrated by media, not just mainstream media, but general social media, with things that have gone on.
Yeah, so there are some things I find frankly appalling and frankly unforgivable. In the aftermath of the June the 20th attack, not just the social media, but the media attacks on our commanders as well, making a judgment on people's ability to command based on their profession or their gender. And I've seen it again, more recently, where people will make ill-informed comments. And that's been quite appalling, really, because, as I've already mentioned, everybody who's in command, they've interviewed for that job. They're the best person for their job. And our commanders are working really, really hard on everybody's behalf. And that you get these either armchair warriors with a keyboard or people who can just comment on social media or sadly, even some people in higher public office choosing to make a comment about that. And that's just not fair, and it's just not right. Now, we do have a policy where we don't engage with this kind of these kind of comments because, quite frankly, it just adds fans the fire. If you'll fans the flames, it means that it continues to perpetuate. But I think it's really important that people know that all of our commanders are really well supported, and those who have been subject to really horrible, vitriolic in some cases, comments on be it social media and wider, we have put support in place for them. But we have this debate quite often about, well, should we actually engage? Should we make sure that people know that our commanders are supported? Or are we potentially getting to the sad state where we will continue to post on social media because we should? It's important that taxpayers and the public know what it is that the Royal Air Force is doing on their behalf. But we might have to turn comments off just because if they're going to be so negative. But we don't want to do that. We want to see the positive comments as well and the support that we have.
I think personally that as the Air Force has shrunk over the years, it's smaller, way more capable than it's ever been. But as we've become smaller, we've become a tighter family, and that's I feel that, I see that, and just hearing what you're saying, that is, we work together.
We do.
Yeah.
We do. And we've got an awful lot of really good people, and we should all know you could never judge anyone based on any of their, those protected characteristics or otherwise. Everybody who's serving in the Royal Air Force has been through a pretty rigorous testing regime to get into the Royal Air Force. They've been through some world-class training and an awful lot of experience to get where they are. These are good people working hard and doing their best, and it's important that they know that they're well supported and appreciated by all of us.
So we've talked about some of the challenges of being AOC 2 Group. Let's have a look at a couple of successes, and maybe not stuff that you've done, but stuff that you've seen your people do. What have been the most amazing things that you've seen happen and experienced from people in 2 Group?
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest, it's not what I've done. It absolutely isn't. I am just really fortunate to have been entrusted with command of the group, but it's our people who are our number one asset. It's often said, but it's true. You've said it already, Peter. We are as operationally committed as we probably ever have been. Our people are really, really busy. And yet we know that we're short in numbers. We're working really hard to get back up to workforce balance. And the challenge is always, what are we going to stop doing? How are we going to turn down the wick? And we've had some successes where we've tried to alleviate the burden on some of our people. But the challenge I give, and from my perspective, is you can't turn down the airbase. That's where people live, where they eat, where they're looked after. It's all of their welfare and the like. So we can't turn any of that offer down. So that, our people have just been working really hard. And for me, that's perhaps the proudest thing about just seeing how our people step up and continue to deliver despite some of the challenges we were talking about earlier on, and despite the fact that they might be doing the work of a couple of people at times. And if not more. So it's about the people and their successes. So certainly on the air bases, I couldn't be more proud of really the, part of the Wittering model. And when we split them out, a lot of the people are actually in the resident forces that can go forward and deliver effect. So the core workforce on a station is actually relatively small. But just seeing how hard they work and how they deliver and how they enable everything that goes on those air bases has been wonderful to see. The second bit is in terms of, again, the global enablement forces, and some of them just perhaps don't get the airtime that they perhaps deserve. I could talk about every single one of them, but let's talk about the MedOps force, or the Med force. Now, these are people that they're not the ones who are sitting in the med centres on all of our stations, although, they will have worked there. But these are the people who make sure, on behalf of Defence, not just the Royal Air Force, they make sure that our people, wherever they are around the world, are well supported. They make sure if we need to get them back to the UK pretty quickly, and we don't talk about this offer, But if needs be, we'll send an aircraft, we'll send a C-17, we'll send it with doctors, with medics, with nurses, with anaesthetists and what have you, to make sure we can get people back to the UK if they've been away in service and they need to. So the way we step over and above there, and I can't go into some of the specifics of what they've done, but if you look at everything that's going on around the world and be it conflict and what we're supporting, there's a couple of real key ones there that are just, I couldn't be more proud to see what they do. If I shifted over to the Combat Readiness Force, but the Royal Air Force Regiment, if you look at harmony rates, and these are the rates where you measure how many nights out of bed people do. So the Royal Air Force Regiment have the highest number of nights out of bed. And are we really recognising everything that they do? The fact that we've always got a squadron in Cyprus and protecting the airbase and some other assets that we have out there. They are the UK and probably Europe's expert on counter UAS or counter drone activity. We have people permanently based in the Middle East there as well. They're also our Arctic warfare experts. They're also the people who turn all of us into military people in phase 1 and continuation training on every one of our air bases. So I'm just so proud to be not just their AOC and see what they do, but also to be head of profession for them as well. And some of the other great successes we've got is just modernising the way we do business. We've got an Optimise programme. So it's perhaps challenges the way we've always done business. You know, how many do you have on a shift pattern with the Air C2 force? You know, those who are 24/7, 365 days, providing the eyes and the ears around the UK and the airspace. But perhaps looking at the way we've done business, how many people we've put to that, how can we do it slightly differently? How can we improve the lived experience? How do we make ourselves more operationally effective and efficient? And then not forgetting, and we haven't really talked much about the third pillar, if you will, that sits in 2 Group is the reserves. The majority of the reserve cadre, certainly reserve squadrons, sit under 2 Group, and they're either what we were calling the General Service Support Squadrons, or they're being renamed the Airbase Operational Support Squadrons, and the Specialist Support Squadrons, but everything that they do in order to support outputs. And if you look at, you know, bang for buck, the amount of operations that they cover, the percentage there, they're really delivering over and above what you might reasonably expect of a reservist cadre. And they're really leaning in well when we look at the transition to conflict work. So we talked a lot about ACE and Agile Combat Employment, but really the buzzwords now about transition to conflict is about how are we prepared as a nation, as a Royal Air Force, for what the future might hold. It's making sure that we are warfighter ready, you know, to quote the chief. We're optimised to fight tonight, but we're making sure we're prepared for what the fight tomorrow is. And the way that all of my air bases, the way that the global enablement forces and the reserves have lent into that have been phenomenal. And we're going to test that under Exercise Agile Warrior over the next couple of weeks. And I'm really excited to see how they step up to that challenge.
Okay, wow. AOC's commendations. That must be a privilege to read all those citations, and then what a challenge to pick out the ones that you believe should receive. Can you tell us about an AOC's commendation, why a line manager should put someone forward, and what should the person receiving that commendation think about that when they receive it?
So one of the best things I do, we talked about when I go and do either an annual formal visit or visit to a station, the offer is always, I will always do a town hall, as you say, get as many people in and come on, and I always offer to do an honours and awards ceremony. And that's the best bit about doing the job. Now, for anybody serving who listens, if you're fortunate enough to get an award, make sure you get it presented formally and make sure you take your family along. Because for them to see you receive an award, it's special for them as well as the individual. And I always make a point of recognising the families and the loved ones and the support network that allows that person to have basically gone above and beyond. We've got a lot of good people doing a lot of good work, but the most altruistic thing that any boss at any level of the Air Force can do is write your people up, recognise what they've done. And, don't worry about it being the most polished piece of staff work, because if we see that there's something in it where they are, we need to recognise this, then we'll help. We'll help to polish that. What I usually say when I'm stood there in front of people, and I congratulate the people who've perhaps got a medal and have got a commendation, but I will say that fewer than 5% of our people who serve ever get recognised with it. So it is a special thing. It really should be, but it shouldn't be so incredibly exclusive. We've got a lot of people stepping above and beyond, and we've got a lot of people working hard and they're busy. But if you can carve out a bit of time just to put pen to paper, it's really important that we recognise our people. And for me, there have been times where I've actually had a tear rolling down my face as I listen to accommodation and I listen to how some people have stepped above and beyond. And it might not just be in their day job. It might be that somebody has been first on the scene of an accident and they've saved somebody's life. And that puts a lump in my throat and that makes me choke. And what a tremendous privilege I have sometimes to meet these people, to shake their hand and to thank them for their service.
Well, we're coming to the end of this chat. 2 Group, you're just about to leave the job. Do you have a new job yet?
I don't, but I'm hoping something will come up pretty soon. As I said, this has been the privilege of my life, of my service, and it's right up there with, being a station commander. What a tremendous privilege to be entrusted with that. So I hand over on April the 14th, so I've got a few weeks still to find a job. And I hope I do. As I say, I love the Air Force. It's been so good to me and for me. But yeah, watch this space.
Your message then to the people of 2 Group that are listening right now, what is your message?
Well, hopefully it's kind of come across there, but thank you. And I do intend on my last day to have a town hall with the headquarters and with all the commanders and out there. But a thank you for your service to everybody. And that's the whole force. That's not just people in regular service. It's the reservists, it's the civil servants, but it's the contractors, all the people who make up the lifeblood of the Royal Air Force. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for your service to King and country. I think you're in a really exclusive club. How many people can genuinely say that what they do is in the service of their country? It's been a real privilege to be your AOC, but the groups transcend people, don't they? I'll move on. AVM Noslyle's coming in after me. He's a tremendous bloke. He'll be fantastic. But I know that everybody will continue to work really hard and to deliver, and I'm hugely grateful. What a privilege it's been.
Air Vice-Marshal Jason Appleton, Air Officer Commanding 2 Group, lad from Bolton, thank you for being on Inside Air.
Thank you. What a tremendous pleasure.
With a look back at some recent news stories for Inside Air, this is Reheat with Corporal Victoria Andrews. Personnel and aircraft from the Chinook Force have deployed to Bardufoss in northern Norway as part of Operation Clockwork. The deployment supports defence activity in the High North and maintains the UK's ability to operate in some of the world's most challenging environments. Operating more than 200 nautical miles inside the Arctic Circle, Chinook crews and engineers will train in extreme cold weather conditions alongside NATO colleagues from the Royal Norwegian Air Force. This training includes mountain flying, underslung load operations and engineering support in sub-zero temperatures. Exercise Hyperion Storm successfully validated the Royal Air Force's Special Operations Air Task Group's readiness for joint operational responsibilities. This as the UK prepares to assume leadership of NATO's Allied Reaction Force Special Operations component in July. Conducted over 2 weeks in January at RAF Leeming, the exercise used a small footprint of just over 200 personnel and tested the RAF's ability to support Land Task Group missions utilising Chinooks from 27 Squadron. This involved demonstrating Special Operations Corps skills of special reconnaissance, direct action and military assistance. And the global Eurofighter Typhoon fleet has reached a major milestone, surpassing 1 million flying hours in operational service. Since first entering service in 2003, Typhoon has established itself as one of the world's most capable multi-role combat aircraft. Over more than 2 decades, it's demonstrated adaptability across air policing, joint patrol initiatives, combat operations, and quick reaction alert duties. That's Reheat for InsideAIR.
I'm AS1 Ben Russell, and this is Under the Hat, where we get to know an aviator in less than a minute. Name you're known by.
Good afternoon, I'm Squadron Leader James Barker, affectionately known as Ronnie.
What's your profession?
I'm a regiment officer based at RAF Wittering.
What's the best thing about your job?
The best part of my job is the people and working with them.
Hardest part of your job?
The hardest part of my job, two here, the people and working with them and the bureaucracy.
Best location you've served?
It was Qatar, and I was working in an info ops / media ops role during the Football World Cup.
And what bit of luxury kit do you never deploy without?
There are two, if I'm allowed to. One is good quality Earl Grey tea, and secondly is my toothbrush. I can put up with all hardships, but I must be able to brush my teeth.
That's all for this episode of Inside Air. Please give us a review and subscribe on your favourite podcast app, and join us again soon.
You've been listening to Inside Air, a behind-the-wire view of the Royal Air Force, its people, technology and operations. If you're serving in the RAF and have a story for us, please speak to your unit media and communications officer. Inside Air is written and produced for the Royal Air Force by RAF Media Reserves.